Rodney.
We're talking about creatine today.
Oh.
Because it was recently brought to my attention that you don't take creatine.
I don't.
But I do.
You do?
I do.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. It's not only for getting swole.
Okay, tell me more.
So we've talked about nootropics before.
Yes.
And
a long time ago.
Pretty sure it's the only way my brain is still functioning with children is nootropics because I take a whole freaking battery.
Yeah.
But creatine has a really positive effect on the brain for focus and mental clarity and energy. Yeah, because it's.
But do you not take scoops full? And
No. There's no bulking or loading phase. So the human body can only absorb 3 grams at a time.
Yeah.
And the average creatine has a scoop for 5 grams. So I just cut that in half. It lasts forever. It's super cheap. It's one of the most researched substances on the planet.
Yeah, for sure.
It's. And you just get the good kind. I think it's Creapure. It's made in Germany. Okay. It's really solid.
I might have to take this.
Mm-hmm. It will help with your recovery from workouts and your muscle density because it helps your muscles retain a little bit of water, so your form and shape will actually get better. But also your brain.
You need to send me this ASAP.
ASAP.
Welcome to the More in Common podcast. Here, we explore the fact that we have more in common than that which divides us by anchoring humanity in a compassionate conversation together. I'm Shelby Stromerson, and I've been a friend of Keith and Rodney for the last couple years now, and I am so excited to support their podcast and share it with you all today. Remember to visit moreincommonpod.com to learn, listen, read, and shop all things More in Common. Again, that is moreincommonpod.com. And if you like what you hear, give them a like on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. You may hear your review read on a future episode. They have dubbed 2020 a decade possible, and this is Season 2, Discovery. Today's episode features a conversation with Tara Bixby. Tara is an expert on empathy as she shares with us some stories that challenge our compassion and our biases. She will talk about working in male prisons as a woman, starting Courageously You, and male and female experiences with mental health, among many other topics. I think that there are valuable lessons we can all draw from Tara's conversation, especially as we continue to face uncertainty together in a global crisis and realize we all have more in common than we originally thought. Enjoy today's episode with Tara Bixby.
So before we get into this episode, I got to tell you a little bit of something that Rodney got me into about 7 months ago. One of those things, he talks about these things all the time, and I hardly ever try them. But this one in particular, Audible for audiobook listening. I tell you, I love reading books. I don't have a lot of time. I got 2 kids, 2 jobs. I got a relationship that I try to invest in. But I really like to read books, and there's a lot of information out there that helps us learn for our business, learn for podcasting, learn for all of the things, or just pleasure in reading. And it gives me that space to listen. So Rodney, thank you for putting me onto them, because I'm excited to put other people onto it too.
Yo, man, glad I could help. I love it. I've been doing it for years. I highly recommend it.
And I know you do it for driving and
I do it for driving in LA. And honestly, you get to get one book for free. You can send a book to a friend for free. You can return any book if you don't like it. I mean, that's lovely. And, they got a trial period going on. You get a free membership to start. So we're going to put a link on our website. Go check it out. It's an affiliate link. We do get a little bit on the back end. So you're supporting us. We really appreciate it. Go to our website, moreincommonpod.com. Check it out.
Check it out. Audible.
But I started Courageously You because I struggled with my own stuff, and I speak woman fluently, and I know what that looks like. And when I was in my internship in college, I worked a lot with females, and I picked up a theme that we all struggle with the same thing: self-doubt, insecurity, body shaming. We feel like we're not good enough. And so I think working in the prisons with males I was missing that other piece of me. And so I created Courageously You, targeting women. I wanted to help someone so bad, and I don't care if nobody admitted they needed the help. I'm a therapist and I'm a human, and I know they do need it. And so I figured if I just showed up every single day, somebody will connect with it. And if I helped one person that day, that's all that mattered to me.
Well, welcome back. Today we are with Tara Bixby. Tara is a licensed counselor who works in a minimum security male prison out in Idaho. However, that is just her day job, as she is on a mission to empower women to live their best life. She normalizes life struggles through stories, provides tools for personal growth, and to help shine light on mental health. You can follow Tara on Instagram at courageously.u. That's courageously.u. Tara, welcome to the show.
What up?
Hey, thanks for having me.
We're excited.
Thanks for connecting with you.
Super excited to get into the mission that you're on in life and understand more about that. But before we do, you've been in multiple prison systems that you've worked in as a counselor.
Yeah,
you've worked in maximum security. Now you're working in minimum. Like, what's that been like for you? Very curious, especially as a female counselor.
Have they all been male?
Yes, I've never worked in the female prison. It's not reality, to say the least.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because you see and hear things that you would never, even in your wildest dreams, imagine. And so when you go in there, it's like kind of going into a whole other world, and the outside world is not there in the moment.
Huh. Can you give us an example? Or
yeah, just the things that you see. Especially I used to work in the acute mental health unit, so I would see things where they act eccentric, or they would engage in behaviors that, like, I couldn't even make that story up if I tried, or just fights. And it's like its own little culture, its own little system. And so they have everything's basically under control, and they go to rec at a certain time, they go to chow at a certain time, and everything, it has a rhythm.
Very regimented.
Yeah.
What you said acute mental health?
Yeah.
I know what acute means, like in a medical sense, like a
sudden,
like a medical emergency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but what does that mean for mental health? And like, what is that word?
The way I look at it is, it's almost like you base their levels on how badly the mental health is impairing their day-to-day functioning. And so you're looking for like their level of acuity. And so the individuals I worked with were the ones that were deemed dangerously mentally ill and were civilly committed by the state of Idaho to be housed in the acute unit because they couldn't be in a mental health treatment center or facility. And so they're the ones that you basically have to confine them in a restrictive area so that they don't harm other people. And we're just trying to get them stable on meds.
So they're not necessarily in prison for committing a crime. They just can't be. Their level of acuity is too high. They're too dangerous on a day-to-day basis to be unrestrained. So they're in a prison, but they're not there for a criminal reason.
Some of them, yeah. Some of them are just people who are from the community and their mental health is so severe that they need to be housed there. And then others, because there's two different kinds. The other type is they have committed a crime, but they're not competent to stand trial and assist in their own defense, essentially. And so we try to stabilize them, get them on their meds, teach them the court process. And then if they can get stable,
the what process?
The court process. Because they have to be, when they go to court, they have to be able to work with their attorney.
So what's that been like for you? I mean, talking to you before the show, like, you didn't set out to work in the prison, obviously.
That wasn't not a life goal.
That wasn't on the dream list.
Not at all.
I mean, what's this been like? What, especially in the acute mental health area, right? Like that's got to be pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not plan this. I actually started out as a cosmetologist, so it was like farthest thing from it. But it was life changing for me, to be honest, because I walked in and I saw a lot of individuals who had the mental health treatment in the community and could have had access to medications. Maybe they wouldn't ended up in prison. So that opened up a world to me of what the community lacks in mental health. And then the other piece was just seeing, it was almost empathy. Like your heart went out to some of those individuals because they weren't in their right mind. And you didn't want to punish them for their behaviors because of that, essentially, because they weren't in their right mind.
I feel like, wait, so cosmetology, prison, acute mental, like, how did that even connect? Like, how did that happen?
I started out as a cosmetologist, and it wasn't for me. And so I moved to California, and my friend was a 911 dispatcher, and she's like, you should apply. And so I was like, okay. And I jumped in, and I applied, and I was doing 911 dispatching in California. And I realized there was more that I wanted to do than be the calm voice on the other end of the line. I felt like I actually wanted to like hear the end story and work with them. And that's when I went back to school, got my psychology degree, and then went and got my master's.
Wow. Now you said what the community lacks as it relates to mental. Like, can you talk a little bit more? Like, what do you think it needs to improve in that area so people don't just go to prison and come see you to get meds?
I think that the prison system is the mental health treatment facility. That's where most of the mental health individuals end up because the community lacks the resources, the funding. If somebody is in crisis and needs to be housed somewhere, that's just not available. We just lack it. The money, the funding, and everything that comes with it. And then access to therapy, it's expensive. And if they can't afford it, they're not getting the treatment. And if they can't afford the meds, there's only so many facilities or treatment centers that will do it for free because you can't make a living if everything's for free. And so a lot of these guys become homeless and they're living on the streets and they're turning to drugs to cope with their symptoms, and then they land in prison.
What is what we had state run mental institutions in the, was it 60s, 70s? When did that end? Do you either you remember or no?
No.
I don't know.
I want to say it was like 70s, late 70s where it shut down, but I don't know. I'll look it up, throw it in the notes.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
what is do you know the percentage of inmates that have mental illness issues or mental health issues?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would say that there's a large majority that access medication, but I can't say specifically how many of them are mental health. I mean, we have a small population that's acute mental health, and then they kind of fall on a spectrum. There's a small population of that, but a lot of it is just kind of like baseline anxiety, depression.
When someone comes to the prison and asks, like you said, not everybody commits a crime before they are there. Like, does that go on their record? What's the impact to the individual who ends up there without having committed a crime? And like, how does that happen?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever thought of that one. Typically what will happen is they'll end up going to like the state hospital, because we have 2 state hospitals in Idaho. And so they'll end up going to the state hospital and they may assault somebody. And because of that, there's like, they can't be out of restraints because they're dangerous. But I don't necessarily think, unless they pick up charges, I don't think it goes on a criminal record. That is a question that I'm not 100% sure of.
Are they eligible or able to get out?
Yeah.
At some point?
Once they're stable, because there's a psychologist in the prison, he will assess them. He does assessments on them. And once we feel they're stable on meds and they're safe to return to the community, they have to go through the court process, but they can return to the community.
So that's why you help them with the court stuff.
Yeah, that's what I did that when I was a psych tech. That was before I became a counselor. So I did that through my whole master's program.
Oh.
How long you been in the prison system as a counselor?
As a counselor, I've been there for 13 months.
Oh, 13 months.
Yeah, but before that, I was at Max for 2.5 years.
Oh yeah, that
What's
has
that?
to be a little bit different, huh?
Yeah, it makes you not fearful anymore. I mean, when you're growing up, you're like afraid of all the bad guys that could potentially harm you, and it's like you recognize they're sitting at your desk talking to you every day now. So
is that because like why is that? Is it because you get to know them and you realize that they're not what they seem to be, or like why are you less?
I think growing up, obviously, if like you look at the media and movies, everything is like bad guys. People are mean, vicious, and so you become almost terrified of what could go wrong, what could happen to you. But where I'm at is I have conversations with guys who commit murder, who have done horrific things. And as a therapist, you get to know them and you talk with them and you process and you realize it's not, they didn't just wake up one day and said, I want to hurt somebody. It goes farther back. It goes to their childhood. It goes to the trauma they experienced and just these little different paths that they took along the way that got them to where they're at. So you see them through a different lens.
How was that? We're spending a lot of time here, but it's fascinating to me.
Okay.
How was that like when you started in that? Obviously, you have these initial biases, especially you sit down with your first inmate who committed murder. Like, how was that transition for you? Because I think this speaks volumes to the capacity we all have for empathy. So often
and compassion. That's the word I was thinking of when you were describing that.
Because so often we have that reaction, or you hear, "Oh, no way I would talk to someone. No way we can forgive. They committed murder." Yet that's hard to do. Like, what was that like for you, and how did you come to a place of compassion?
To be honest, I don't think I ever struggled with that. I think I just went into it. I just had to tell myself, I'm not working with them for their crime. I'm working on them for like the here and now, what they're struggling with now. Because a lot of the times I wouldn't even want to know what they did. Because I felt once I knew it kind of made me not show up 100%. And so I wouldn't do my research into their crime. So I
found out later as you found out.
Yeah. I just try not to work with who they were then. I try to work with who they are now.
It's such a powerful statement.
Is that something you learned in your schooling, or is that just you as a person?
I honestly don't know. I think I try really hard to look at people based on their inner child. Like, I don't think people just wake up and they're evil. I think things happen to us along our path and we cope the best way we know how, and we try to make sense of it the best way we know how. And some of us just get lost, especially if substances get thrown into the mix. So I don't know. I still struggle. I should backtrack. I still struggle with certain offenders that commit certain crimes. I have a hard time sometimes not wanting to say what I really feel, but I know that it's not my job to punish them. They're sentenced with punishment enough, and it's my job to try to help them now to change the behavior that got them there.
So you have all of this natural instinct, yet your first, like as it relates to people, you have some things that you do that sound like it's not necessarily from training or degree, yet you went into cosmetology first. Like, where does all of that come from? You grew up in Idaho. You said 911 sent you to get your degree in psychology, but was that it? Like, is there more there that ultimately led you to do that?
I honestly don't know. I feel like I've always been a very sensitive child, and I was hyper emotional, and I just felt things deeply. I never identified as an empath, but I do pick up on other people's energy. And I always was the kid, like if they're in school, if somebody was left out or like the outcast and nobody talked to them, I always wanted to befriend that person because I physically felt in my heart I felt bad for them. I don't want anybody to feel lonely. And so I think I carried that through my adulthood. And then cosmetology school was just a random, I don't know what to do. My mom did it, so cool, I'll try it out too. And then I realized that was kind of like the start of my counseling, to be honest, because I had clients confiding in me things that they had never told anybody before. And I felt like, wow, these people are going through some serious stuff. I had a client once tell me she was raped and she had never told anybody that. And I didn't know what to do with that because I was 21 and I didn't have any education in that background. And so just little baby steps have kind of carried me through. And I don't know.
It's funny you say that. I was talking to my barber this week when he's cutting my hair, and he's like, yeah, it's kind of like I'm a psychologist. Like the stuff that people tell him, and I've heard that from real estate agents too. Like they're like relationship counselors.
Well, getting your hair done is a form of self-care. And if you think about it for females, well, for most females, we have a lot of nerve endings on our head. So if somebody's in playing with your hair, you're relaxed. You're in a relaxed state. And a lot of the times,
it's the best thing in the world, getting my hair washed and cut.
Yeah. And a lot of the times you're not even looking at the person. So it's almost like you're processing out loud while you're relaxed.
Interesting.
So hairstylists are unofficial counselors, I think.
Unofficial. We should just start training up the
hair
barbers
shampoo
and the salons of the world with the psychology in the world will be healthier.
We'd have better. That might be a more cost-effective mental health system, right?
People are special.
Yeah, you got
we'll start with Floyd's and Supercuts.
Give him some referrals to some psychiatrists who can prescribe meds. But it's an interesting business model. It could be a good way to introduce mental health care into the. We just solved the nation's mental health crisis.
The U.S. mental health crisis and figured out how to make money doing it.
Well, it's a lot of, I can't speak for men, but a lot of women they go there because they want to feel beautiful. They want to feel better about themselves. And so you could work it in that you're helping build their self-esteem in the meantime.
I mean, there is nothing better than a shampoo.
Like for me, it used to just be like, I have to get a haircut because my hair looks like horrible. But now, like, I love getting a fresh cut. And for most dudes, like getting a fresh cut, I feel good, look good, play good, show up well. Like, and then like sitting in the barbershop is, at least for me, like it's hilarious, like a comedy show. But it's also like there is this. It's a space for men to speak about things that they typically wouldn't speak about. And like it's not necessarily the deepest always, depends on the day and who's in there, but it is a space that's apart from all of the other stuff that's happening that we can talk about things. And I think barbers, because of that kind of definitely connection.
So what was your expectation? I mean, that's an interesting transition going into some of the conversations you've had to have in maximum security. What was that transition like for you mentally? Like you were assigned, I'm going to go work in a prison. I got a job, but you were a sheltered kid. Like how did you navigate that expectation?
I don't think I had any. I like fly by the seat of my pants for some reason. And I just let my heart take me where it's going because I moved to California on impulse. I started dispatching, didn't think anything of it. I didn't even, when I was in undergrad, I never thought I'm going to be a counselor. I've never had expectations for my future. I just kind of, pieces fall and I chase it. And even now as a counselor, I'm licensed. I thought once I'd be licensed, I'd be done. And now I'm chasing Courageously You because I had this overwhelming burn in my heart. Like I'm meant to do more. I always quote Steve Jobs, the people that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So
I love that quote.
I really never had expectations. I just roll with it.
So you said you never worked in female prisons?
Mm-mm.
Just male. No. And then Courageously you're focused specifically on mental health for women.
Yeah.
Why never women's prisons?
Honestly, because there's never any openings for the female facilities. But I started Courageously You because I struggled with my own stuff, and I speak woman fluently, and I know I know what that looks like. And when I was in my internship in college, I worked a lot with females, and I picked up a theme that we all struggle with the same thing: self-doubt, insecurity, body shaming. We feel like we're not good enough. And so I think working in the prisons with males, I was missing that other piece of me. And so I created Courageously You, targeting women. Kind of where that came from.
Did you say you speak woman fluently?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I know women's struggles. I know what women think. I know how they feel. I know how we get lost in our minds and our heads, and our thoughts run away from us. We're constantly comparing ourselves to the highlight reel of social media. We think, oh, their life looks better than ours. Where when it comes to males, I only know what my husband basically tells me. And from what I gather, he's never comparing himself. He's just like, whatever. Like, I just think women are way too hard on ourselves. And I know when I was in grad school, I really struggled, and I felt like I was struggling alone in silence. And I think a lot of people are afraid to show up and be vulnerable because they don't want to be judged or shamed. But I don't know. I just feel like I connect a lot better with women because I know what that looks like.
Interesting.
Where do you think the judgment and shame comes from? Do you think it's a social pressure? Do you like what are your thoughts on that?
I think at some point in our lives, somebody said something to us, and we formed a memory from that, and that's where it grew from. It manifested from it. It could have been when you were a little kid and you had to give a speech in your class and somebody laughed at you. You remembered that. So now you're terrified to speak in the future because it's like your amygdala, your brain, the neuroscience, it remembers that memory, even if you don't consciously remember it. Or if your parent told you, shame on you, you shouldn't have done that, you've just internalized, I'm a bad person, I shouldn't have done that, and it's grown with you. So I just think little things have happened to us through our past, and it's just stuck with it. And a lot of the times we're not even consciously aware of it.
Do you think that it's different for men because we generally get more encouragement in a maybe different way or a social way?
Wait, before you answer that, Keith, do you think it's actually different for men?
I don't. And I think that's kind of one of those things that I always like to seek to understand. Because we do process information differently, right? Men and women. But that moment at his childhood that sticks with us, like how do you think we process it differently, I guess, is probably a better question.
I guess if like reflecting on it, maybe we all process it the same. We externalize it differently. It presents itself differently. Like I think men are told, don't show emotion, don't cry, you need to be strong, you need to be tough. And women are coddled when we cry. We're told it's okay. And so women learn it's okay to speak your shame or your fears or whatever into the world. And guys are like, if a dude cries, people are looking at him like, what the heck? You're weak. When that's not reality. We all cry.
So you think...
Which it's like a double-edged sword in both cases. Yeah. Young girls are allowed to cry and have emotion, but then young women and women are then said to be weaker, air quotes, because they have emotions. Yeah, whereas men are told not to have them, and then they can't fully exist in a room often when they can't know their own emotions or what's going on.
And it's such an interesting, when you talk about the language spoken, it's like there's a shame to express in women because of the weakness. And it's like, oh, I don't want to, I mean, I talk to my wife about this all the time. I don't want to be perceived as this because I won't get as far in this. Whereas men, it's like you express it, you're weak, but it manifests. The language really is different. It's just different.
The weakness is seen is different, right? Like me taking paternity time is perceived as weak,
right,
by many men that I work with. Versus like if a woman expresses a feeling about a thing in a sales deal. It's like we have no room for feelings here. This is a sales deal. We need numbers and facts. It's like you're weak.
Like the running
you can't be a
joke
sales
that,
leader because you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. The running joke that if a woman was president, we'd be at war once a month. I'm like, are you kidding me?
We're the more aggressive ones, right?
Yeah.
I think,
well, which is an interesting, which is a very, like, I've never actually thought, I've heard that comment. I don't know if I thought about it, but like, how many presidents do we have that didn't start a war or didn't have a war on their watch?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Or at
in
least
fact,
to.
it is very closely correlated with a successful presidency.
It is. Yeah.
Or air quote. That's air quote successful.
So what is it then? Because I think it's great. And I think, what you're doing provides a space because, I mean, it's like the barbershop, like we talked about, right? It is for a lot of men. I don't have this experience, but I mean, heck, LeBron has a show on HBO called The Shop, right? It's especially in Black communities.
I was gonna say, like I told my barber this week, I feel like if every American, every color, creed went to Black barbershops, the country would be better. The country would be better off.
There's a lot of dialogue that happens, from everybody. So what is it though that you're trying to do with Courageously You? Like, what is it you do, and how does it function and operate? And I'm just curious to understand your current execution to help women manage all these things.
I'm still trying to narrow down my niche on that because it's really large right now because I think I could do it all. But at the end of the day, I just want women to not struggle alone in silence. I want them to know that you're not alone in your struggle. The reason you feel alone is because nobody talks about it. And so that's kind of where I like to share stories to normalize struggle so that nobody feels alone. I think we are basically in self-imposed restraints because we allow our thoughts to take control of us. We tell ourselves we can't do something. We have irrational beliefs. Our self-talk is toxic. Anxiety is on the rampant right now. And so I try to educate women on be mindful of your thoughts, be mindful of your fears. What are you telling yourself? Be kind to yourself because a lot of it comes down to the circuitry in your brain. The more you say something, the stronger that wiring gets. It's going to become your truth. So I'm kind of a hot mix of a bunch of different areas, and I'm still trying to figure it out. But at the end of the day, I just want women to stop being a roadblock in their own life. I want them to live their best life because I'm very passionate about our life is short. I had 2 people pass away last summer, and it hit me on my bum basically that I could die tomorrow, and I want to know that when that time comes, I live every single moment to my best. And so I want to help women who hide out at home for whatever reason that is and help them get out of their house. Go live your life.
As you do this, like, I've seen, we connected to you through Instagram, like the posts and just the posts themselves, like the photos and whatnot, the words, like they're eye-catching because of like what they mean and what you're saying, and then what you write about them is just very insightful. Like, how else are you interacting? Like, are you interacting outside of Instagram, or like what are the modes you're working with women now?
I have a private Facebook group that is a safe space for people to kind of share their story, and other women can connect with them there and say, hey, I've been there too. This is what I did. So I have that through the Facebook group. And then I recently started a YouTube channel, which I'm learning that on the fly because I am not technology savvy, but I'm trying to show up more on videos just to provide some psychoeducation.
When did you start Courageously You?
I started this last November.
Oh, and wow. Really?
Yeah, this is kind of why I'm so passionate is I was that girl. The girl I'm trying to help was me, and I know what it feels like. And so I originally started, it was called Courage with a Splash of Coffee, and I created it and I started it. And then I got inside my head and I was like, this is stupid. Nobody's going to like it. What am I doing?
Name.
And I deleted it. I just walked away and I left it. And then 2 or 3 weeks went by and I still felt that burning in my heart. And I read Brene Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection. And I was like, I'm doing it. I don't care. Brene Brown just gave me permission to be courageous and vulnerable. And I haven't looked back.
What was so when you restarted it, like, what was the feeling like when you launched it? Like, did you feel relief or good or scared, terrified? Like, how did you feel when you went back the second time?
I almost felt like borderline manic because I was so excited. Like, ideas kept flooding to me. Like, I wanted to help someone so bad. And I don't care if nobody admitted they needed the help. I'm a therapist and I'm a human and I know they do need it. And so I figured if I just showed up every single day, somebody will connect with it. And if I helped one person that day, that's all that mattered to me.
What's the biggest? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, keep going.
It's okay. I was going to say I probably presented as I was a little manic because I was just so excited about it.
Yeah, Keith probably gets that from me like once a week when I'm like, "Yo, bro, I got like 15 ideas of which way we need to go. We need to do this, this, and this." And he's just like,
"Slow down,
chill out, bro."
Yeah, my husband's like, "Pick one thing and stick with it."
I've told Rodney that about 20 times.
And my wife tells me that all the time.
Yeah.
What's so to that point though? People may not admit it, and I'm just gonna show up. Like, what have some of the challenges been in trying to get people to talk? Like, you have a private group. Is it hard to get people to engage or to join it or to even come to a place where they want to share? What's that like?
I find that there's either the woman that will purge everything or they won't say anything. And so trying to find that middle balance. And I think a lot of it comes down to if they put it out to the universe, that's being vulnerable. And if nobody responds to it, you start to get in your head and think, oh, do they think that's stupid? Am I crazy? And I just think it all goes back to our narrative. We get inside our heads and we regret doing what we did. And then the shame may creep in if you have a history of shaming yourself. But no, it's challenging to get people to talk. And I try to show up and be vulnerable and say, hey, I've been there. This is what it looks like for me.
Like give an example for people to follow.
Yeah, and then you'll get like a snowball momentum going.
How go ahead, Rodney.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think that men and women are getting like a different version of the same message? Like you just mentioned like the vulnerable thing. Like for men, like it's just not like, at least for me, I'll speak for me, but the message was like any sign of weakness, especially talking about a personal experience or an emotion or a feeling, like that's just super vulnerable and you're weak, you're going to be attacked. And I think women have a version of that for vulnerability. It's probably not the exact same, but is there anything to that?
I think as a society, we're taught don't be vulnerable, don't air your dirty laundry, don't let people see that side of you. And I think the way I truly believe, I love Brene Brown. I think she is paving the way. And so I think she's giving amazing. People permission to show up and be seen and stop putting up your highlight reel and stop pretending that life is great when you're struggling. And I think for people to feel okay with being vulnerable, they have to feel secure in their strength. So for me, in the past, I wasn't courageous by any means until I was able to identify what have I done in my life that shows that I am strong enough to be vulnerable if somebody has something toxic to say to me. And so it's identifying your strength.
Do you think that means that everybody, do you think that means everybody should share their vulnerability on social media or just to certain people? Or like, what does that mean from your stance?
I think it's a time and a place, and if it fits the situation and it's kind of like counseling. We're always told don't self-disclose unless it benefits your client. So I don't like seeing people post rants. I call them rants. Like don't rant on social media. But if you see your buddy that's like, this happened, I'm struggling, you can reach out and be like, I don't know what that feels like, but I've experienced something, this is what I went through. just to normalize, like, this is normal. What you're feeling is normal.
It's
but definitely don't
Rodney,
want tangents.
Yeah. But so Rodney, your question though, like this message about, between men and women, and there is a sentiment out there. It's like, well, why are we separating? But there is an importance to, and I'm curious, Tara, to get your take on this. Like, even though we are experiencing very similar things as men and women, I think we do experience it very differently. And you talk about speaking fluent female, right? It is a different language. Like,
Yeah.
do you have a take on that? Like, why it's so important to, even if it's isolating, it's not separating, where men can talk to men and women can talk to women, and feel comfortable in that space. Like, do you have thoughts on that as to why that's important?
I think the reason depression and anxiety is an epidemic right now is because people aren't talking about stuff. We're just internalizing, and especially in men. I can honestly say I don't know a ton about men, because the prison population is a lot different than the community population.
Sure.
But what I've learned from watching the men in my life is that they don't want to talk about it. It's almost as if they're afraid of the feeling that might come up. And so if you are having a conversation with another man and you're overcome with this overwhelming emotion, you might cry. And then what's your buddy going to think of you as you start crying? And then that's when you get anymore. In your head. Yeah, like,
yeah.
I think it's ridiculous that guys can't cry. My dad's a crier. He cries in movies, and I think that's why I'm so emotional. Is both my parents are very emotional people, and for some guys it's okay to show up and be emotional, but some other guys, they're just like, nope. They just will not cry.
Like, but what was the example they had? Like, if the example they had was not to cry, or
right.
Probably.
I don't know if you've seen the video of the Atlanta Braves baseball players. Acuna Jr. and I don't know who the other guy is. But this video,
know even if you said his name.
Yeah, is Acuna Jr., who's like a rising star in baseball, is sobbing into his teammate's chest while his teammate massages his head, because he had found out in the middle of the game that his mom just passed away.
Oh my God.
Oh wow.
And they caught this interaction on TV that is just him just helping him, like just letting him, and they're Latin American baseball players, right? The male emotion is very different in Latin America than it is in North America, right? So it's just it's a great example of the health of expression and having male interactions. But yeah, go ahead, Rodney.
Well, I don't want to go too far down it, but I just feel like some of the bigger emotional expressing men that I've known have been athletes, which is kind of goes against the paradigm. Like, well, you're an athlete, like you should be able to tough out anything. Which many of the athletes I've known have fit that archetype, but then there's the others. They're just like big hearted, big loving, big feeling, like angry, like all of it. They feel it all. They let it out there. There's like a nerve,
it's a healthy release when you're. Yeah. I always think too, like for me in grad school, exercise was my therapy, and I would exert myself as hard as I could. I would sprint and I'd give it all, and I would cry afterwards. A lot of people talk about crying when they exercise, and it is because exercise acts as a cathartic release for you. You push your body, and it almost leaves all the stress and emotion you have right there. And so with athletes, it could be exercise induced, or it could also go back to what I said about when you know your strength, you're a little bit braver when it comes to showing your vulnerability. Because I'm sure LeBron James doesn't care what anybody thinks.
To your point about energy release, I read that in one child book, like with our toddler, like they were talking about sleeping and napping throughout the day, and like at the end of the day, like they may just cry, like they may just lose it, and there may be nothing wrong. They might just have extra energy that they need to like cry off. And I was like, interesting.
My daughter, this was last week when we were recording. Side note, she didn't want to go to bed, but she was tired and she wanted to. And my wife was putting her down for a nap, and she asked my wife to leave so she could cry. And she cried for half an hour.
She asked, but she specifically was like, "I'm gonna cry now, so you should."
She's like, "I want to cry." Yeah, it was.
I'm a crier. I cry whenever I'm stressed. It's like I'm a balloon. I feel stressed or overwhelmed. I cry, and I am perfect after. It's that release of energy. I just gotta get it out.
I'm becoming much more of a crier.
Yeah,
I definitely had the. I remember seeing my dad cry in front of me once, and he apologized. So that was the. That was the model for me. It was like, this isn't okay, like for me to cry in front of you. So I was like, okay, I don't cry, and like.
So we just talked about, like, we went down this rabbit hole for men. I'm curious to get your take, like what is different, and I think this is just important, right? So we understand the importance of having our groups that are part of those identities, especially our gender identities, right? Like having those male, female groups, or whatever group you need to be a part of. What do you think is different in your fluent language of female?
I honestly think it's socially acceptable for females to be emotional. We're titled emotional creatures, so when we cry, people are like, "Oh, like that's normal. We have periods. We're emotional. We're roller coasters." So I think it's just built up in us as kids. You see, back in the day, women would always come together like tribes. Like you connected with your women, and we would talk and we'd share stories. And we're the nurturers. We're the emotional creatures, and that's the title. So we're not shamed for crying. We're almost, like I said earlier, we're coddled for it. We're told, "Oh, it's okay. Everything's gonna be fine." Or if a guy cries, or a dad would look at their kid and be like, "Stop crying. Like you're a man. Grow up." I think a lot of it comes down to society. Because if a girlfriend calls me crying,
yeah. Oh no,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, if a girlfriend called me crying, I wouldn't think twice about it. I would pick up the phone and we'd talk about it and go about our way. Or if she had a bad day, we'd meet and hang out. But I don't know how many guys just pick up the phone and call their buddy and start crying in their ear. That'd freak you out, probably.
So it probably would have. Like, but it would have freaked me out so much that I would have been like, "What's going on? Like, let's talk." Like, obviously something's going down. You need to talk. But now, for me, it'd be like, "Oh, okay, well, what's going on?" But yeah, I think for a lot of guys, it probably would freak them out.
Yeah, and I think it's just it's interesting to me how we collectively have these things that lead to very similar emotions, but we ultimately process and execute through them differently as male and female.
You talk about normalizing, like, what you said, like normalizing in general, like for men who don't understand, like why would we even have this conversation, or why would women be having this conversation, or why is that important? It's just like
you're really doing a good job putting words to my thoughts today, Rodney.
Boom.
Therapist in the making.
It is like you're really in my head today. It's usually the other way around.
It's usually flipped. Yeah. I'm like, and he's like, well, what he's trying to say is.
Very curious though about something you said earlier. Unless there's anything you wanted to add on this, Tara.
Oh no, I think men. Have you ever seen the movie His, Hers, and Ours, or like the Brady Bunch? That's how groups should be. So like the Brady Bunch, he had his kids, she had her kids, and then they were the whole family. That's how groups need to be. Guys need to have their guy groups, girls need to have their girl groups, but then you can coexist to have like your mixed group together.
I mean, over time, that's kind of like you mentioned villages and tribal. Like that's how we were segmented for long, many years, and then Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution just effed everything up.
But you said something about holistic approach to meds. Like
that's a new topic for me.
Yeah, like can we I mean
It's new
we
for
don't
me.
have a ton of time left, but I'm really curious to understand what that looks like.
So I recently got exposed to the holistic side of it. I listened to a podcast. I can't remember the name of it, but I can find out. And she talks about
Okay.
how what you eat is impacting your mental health because your body is basically being fed these toxins and it's constantly inflamed. And so your brain is working harder to get rid of that inflammation. And that hit me like a truck because I'm just like, I never thought that the reason I feel depressed, the reason I feel sluggish and checked out and have no motivation was because my body was fighting to heal itself. I always just thought, oh, I'm depressed. And so I'm not competent in that area. I'm just starting learning it. But people turn to mental health medication to cope with their symptoms. And it's not working because no matter how many people flood to get meds, we're still increasing. We still have more depressed people than we have ever before. And so if meds were doing their job, we'd see a decrease in people accessing medications. And so instead of seeking meds, people should see, okay, what is the problem? Like, why do I need meds in the first place? And try to identify, okay, what's the root of the problem? Try, what's your sleep look like? Are you getting enough REM sleep? Are you exercising? Are you moving your body? Self-care? Are you engaging in breathing? But instead of checking those things, people just think, I want that Band-Aid. I want that quick fix. And they don't ever identify what's going wrong because your body's trying to tell you something.
And it's really interesting too, because this whole self-care movement still has that, like for I think, especially with the older population, has more of a uh, I hate this term, but I can't think of anything like a frou-frou feeling to it, right?
Woo, like a woo woo.
It's like ooh, like a hippy dippy
The hip,
type of
yeah.
thing, right? And it's like no, just meds are acceptable. Whereas, what is it? 60% of your body's serotonin is produced in your stomach, or some,
And
what?
serotonin.
Yeah, like you've got a lot of neurotransmitters actually produced in your stomach that
Yeah.
have this same effect. Go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not confident in this actual area. It's just a new one I'm kind of diving into.
Okay,
But
love
they're
it.
even saying now that it's not even genetics. It's not even necessarily the serotonin in your brain, that it comes down to the food that you're putting in your body. It's impacting our whole entire system. And so that's why they do the holistic method, is you're treating the whole body, not just the brain.
Like Eastern medicine and some religion says like the gut is the second mind or the second brain, and then science is finally catching up. I've like
It's
looking
actually
at
proving that out.
the vagus nerve, like the biggest connection from the brain to the stomach, like over 80% of the communication is from the gut to the brain, not the brain to the gut.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
well,
Well, that's why
obviously
belly breathing is so important. It's because when you do that deep diaphragmatic breathing, it pushes on your vagus nerve and it shoots up to your brain and calms it. But people, they struggle to do that because it's not like you breathe once and your symptoms go away. I always say it's like a muscle. You have to lift every day to build that muscle. You have to engage in breathing, exercise every day to basically rewire your amygdala so it doesn't respond.
That all being said, do you think there's a place for medicine? I mean, especially you do acute stuff, so like medicine to help people normalize so that they can start working on food and everything else.
I should do a disclaimer because I don't want to shame like populations out there that are accessing meds, because I do think mental health medication has a purpose. I've seen it with some people. They absolutely need it to have a life worth living, because without it, they can't function. So I do know that meds have a place, and there's no shame in seeking medication management. I do think that meds should be used as a bridge to getting stable. It should be the bridge that connects you with therapy. You should be doing the work while you're on medications, trying to identify instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on it. I like to think of it as like the snooze button on your cell phone. If you take meds, you're essentially just hitting snooze. The alarm's going to ring again. But unless you turn off your ringer, which would be like going to therapy and doing the work to turn off those symptoms, when you stop your meds, the symptoms are going to start ringing again.
Is it the case that you might need the meds to even, like, for the therapy to even help, like for you to even get through to making progress?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could be, and I'm going to steal this from your guys' podcast episode, but I heard the one where she said, if you're drowning, sometimes you need the meds to pull you up out of water so that you can get your head above water. I thought that was golden, and I ran with that one.
Yeah, take it.
Thank you, Allie.
Yeah.
Thanks, Allie.
Yeah, there's no shame in accessing meds because some people absolutely need it.
Yeah. No, that's it. So what's your, we got about 10 minutes left. So what's your vision? Like first of all, I mean, I'm shocked that you started in November because at least from an online measurement standpoint, we don't have access to your private Facebook group. You know, your following is growing. People are paying attention to some of the things you're doing in a fairly aggressive growth way.
Seem to be interacting in
like
an active community.
How is it going, and what's the direction that you're trying to take this?
I'd really like to get digital courses going, and I want to make therapy easier to get a hold of. I had a horrific emotional nervous breakdown in grad school, and I walked out of my state job. When I worked at Mass, I walked out of it, and it was for a million different reasons, but burnout, stress, lack of self-care. And when I did that, I lost my health insurance, which meant I lost my EAP, which meant I lost my counseling.
Oh,
and
Employee Assistance Program, if people don't know.
Yeah.
EAP. Yeah.
Good call.
So all of a sudden, here I was in the throes of grad school to be a counselor, and I had no access to a counselor. And I could have went and paid for one, but they're so expensive, and I just walked out of my job. And so that really awoke in me. So there's a lot of people that can't afford counseling because it's $150 a pop. So I want to do digital courses. Yeah, digital courses that allows people to get help in their home for way cheaper.
Or teaches hairdressers and barbers
how to.
We got a business model here, Tara. We're going places.
I know.
It's the scalp massage emotional therapy release technique.
That's why I'm having a hard time narrowing down the niche, because I'm like, I did dispatching, hair. I just have so many. I know, so many avenues. But at the end of the day,
I was gonna ask the counselor. Do you have your own therapist now? I asked. I wanted to ask this when we were talking about prison and like how you see it's not in real life. You said, and like how do you cope with that? Like how do you deal with that? And how do you just like what do you do?
I don't know. I must be disturbed because it doesn't faze me. When I walk out of those gates, I leave my work at work. I don't even think about it.
You also have a physical like disconnect from it, like a gate.
I'm thankful. I'm very grateful to be outside of those gates when I leave. So I think that's why I'm more focused on like the gratitude of like I'm thankful that every day I can choose what I do because those guys have no choice in what they do, and I'm grateful that I have the life I have because nothing kills me more than when I look at an offender who has a life sentence and he's like 22. And I'm like, that's your only life. And like my heart aches for that person because I'm like, what happened to you that got you here? Because your life's gone now. And so I'm just so appreciative of my own life every day.
Now, what is your method of self-care? Like, what do you do to practice that you could tell all the people who follow you?
I have two go-tos. One of them is exercise. If I do not exercise, I always joke that I'd be on the other side of the door at work because it's what keeps me grounded. It really does. It's a cathartic release for me. And so that's my one self-care. And my other self-care is I'm very introverted. And so my job at the end of the day is draining for me because I've had to really give everything to that person. And so coming home and sitting in complete silence, laying on my bed, no noise at all, no cell phones, and just laying there. I could stay home all weekend and not talk to a single person and be fine. You're
talking to two introverts.
We different
different types of introverts. Yeah. But do you find this, like being in this conversation, do you find it draining or will you need space afterwards?
Oh no, because I'm excited. This is my passion. I could talk about it all day. It's when I'm having to suck other people's energy because I do feel deeply. Like when I have an offender sitting in front of me and he tells me his mom pimped him out and he was sexually abused, like my heart literally aches for that person. And so when I hear those stories for 8 hours a day, it's hard for me. It drains me.
Hey, could you define introvert for us real quick? Because like I hear people use, like, there's lots of different ways people use it, but what does it mean for you?
For me, it just means people drain me. Like if you think of a gas tank, the more I give and the more I give and the more energy I serve that person, the less gas I have in myself. And so I'm good in groups of like 3 people, but to throw me in a large crowd, I'm almost like a turtle. Like I want to go into my shell and hide because it's too overstimulating. It's too overwhelming. But I just look at it as an energy thing for me personally. And when I say people suck the energy out of me, that sounds bad, but it's because I show up and I just feel deeply.
Yeah. The battery analogy that I got, like somebody was like, if you're an extrovert, you wake up with an empty battery and it gets filled throughout the day when you interact with people. And if you're an introvert, you wake up with a full battery and it gets drained and you get to refill it.
Yeah. I like that.
That is a good analogy.
I have to ask this question. This is complete tangent, but when you talk about that story, like when someone comes in and says I was pimped out by my mom and I was abused, like then there are a lot of people out there who will say just power through, pick yourself up and go succeed. Go get a job, and we shouldn't be helping you out. You just gotta power through it. Like, what's your take on that mindset, especially given what you've experienced and where you came from, being that you grew up in a bit of a sheltered space?
I think, and I'm sure this would upset some people, but I think ignorance comes to play. I think people that weren't exposed to the harshness of realities, and I was that person, they don't understand. And I wrote a huge long piece on this about the gun violence going on right now in America and how people blame the guns, but I always say you got to go to the person. These guys, yes, they committed a horrible crime, but look at the stability they had in their homes. A lot of these kids enter the foster care system. They're sexually abused. They're physically beat. They're told they're pieces of shit. It's this trauma, and this is this little kid that has no safety. The attachment issues come into play. And yeah, some kids get out and they do succeed and they do really well. But I had a guy tell me once that he turned to heroin because it was the only way he could get his mom to pay attention to him. So when he used with his mom as a 10-year-old, she showed him love. And people don't see that side of life, essentially. So when you hear those stories, your heart aches for them because I had good parents. I was never exposed to that. And when a little kid thinks the only way he can get love is to use heroin, you just opened up a whole path of substances and nothing good comes from that.
I don't know what to say after that.
Yeah. The tangent came from something I watched yesterday, and
what's
the
bootstraps argument? It's the pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Like
you can be good too, American.
And that this is the whole government politics conversation, and we're not going to get into now, but it's just one of those things where I struggle wholeheartedly that like people need help, and it's I get it. You as an individual were able to come from harsh reality, but like there are some harsh realities out there. Like that is a harsh reality, and that just makes me sad.
I was going to ask, have you heard of the book I think it's called A Piece of Cake is what it's called, by Cupcake Brown? I just finished reading that, and her story was it was a horrific story of trauma and abuse, and she was in gangs and drugs, and she ended up being an attorney. And so I think it kind of piggybacks on what you're saying is, people can choose paths and pick themselves up by the bootstraps, but if they don't have the support and they don't know how to cope, if you get the borderline personality and they lack coping skills, they just might not know how to.
Yeah. I would also presume, and I wrote that down because I want to read it, someone somewhere helped her. Like, there's the narrative and then there's the truth. Like, yes, Bach wrote his first symphony when he was 5. His dad was a composer. nobody talks about the fact that his dad was a composer, so he was around it. And also his first symphony was shit, but like he was around it, so he had an example, and he could.
Like
He had the
if my daughter
opportunity.
wrote a symphony, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. I don't know what that is, right?
Right.
Like,
You'd be like, throw that away.
Yeah, have a nice day,
like,
right?
dots
It
on a
doesn't
page.
sound good, right?
But like you think about a 10-year-old and heroin, like
Ugh.
for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, how does a 10-year-old not only know what heroin is, but have access to it? Like that's how bad this is. Like my response to somebody would be like, well, they just need to like, rose from concrete, like they can bootstrap it up. And it's like, well, did you know what heroin was when you were 10? Like that's the situation. That's the direness of that situation. Is direness a word? I don't know. But like that's how bad that situation is.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Tara.
Oh my God. That's gonna be in my head all weekend.
What a wonderful conversation, and now my head is spinning. But no, seriously, it's been great having you on the show. We are.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Sometimes I love this because I often forget that I'm recording a podcast, and other than this microphone that's in my face, but I very much had that feeling today. So
yeah,
thank
it was
you.
very fun and like
it was just loose and it was good, and I
really
it.
I didn't get to say it in the episode, but I really really love your posts. Like I connect with them on a deep level, and like just for some of the personal work that I'm doing, like it's helpful. Yeah, like it's encouraging.
Yeah, thank you.
So with that said, Rodney.
Yeah. All right. So we're here at the end, and we got to ask you, or we want to ask you, what would you leave our listeners with as the nugget of wisdom or goodness?
I'd say get out of your head and stop being a roadblock in your life, because this is the Super Bowl. It's not practice, and you're only going to get one shot at it.